Hey guys, it's Penguin here, and welcome back to another goal making video. Today we are going to be doing another Q&A. What I have done is asked in my Discord, basically any questions that people might have related to gold making or WoW or just myself in general, and I've collected about 10 questions that we're going to be going over. I'm just going to be giving my personal feedback, and then of course you guys can comment down below or in the Discord and just kind of let me know if you agree, disagree, or have a completely different point that I never even brought up. But before we get started, I do want to say that since this is kind of just a question and answer type of video, you definitely can listen to this kind of as a podcast. I mean that in the way that feel free to minimize this and just kind of listen to it in the background if you're playing WoW, doing homework, just browsing the web, doing work, whatever you have to do, feel free to minimize the screen. But of course, if you do want to keep the video up like a standard one, you will see the questions on screen, and every once in a while I might pop up like a website that I'm talking about or something like that, but it's up to you. Do not feel bad if you do want to minimize and just listen as you're working. But without further ado, we are going to get right into the first question. Alright, so the first question we have, which is kind of a funny one, is there any way to make Shadowlands Engineering useful? So I think that's just really funny because if you guys have not been aware, Shadowlands Engineering is definitely by far the worst profession of this expansion, just due to the fact that it does not have a lot of useful items to craft, and there's no mount this time around currently like previous expansions have had. And honestly, at this point, I would not recommend getting engineering strictly for the Shadowlands aspect of it. Of course, Old World is still very good, so if you are kind of talking about engineering, you definitely should get it for the Old World factors, but we are just strictly right now talking about Shadowlands. I will say, if you're trying to make Shadowlands engineering useful, I would say there's a possibility that you could get engineering to use the auction house inside of Oribos. If you guys aren't familiar, in most major cities that do not have a open auction house, if you are an engineer, there is a private auction house that only engineers can use. So I mean, technically, if you're trying to get a auction house inside of Oribos, whether that's your main character or like a bank tune, but normally bank tunes are too low level to be in Oribos anyways. But I will say, if you're somebody who does not want to always go to, let's say, Orgrimmar or anywhere, or log off onto a bank tune that's sitting in Org or anything like that, and you want to try to buy your materials inside of Oribos, then engineering could be something that you might want to consider. Of course, the only downside is that you've now taken up a profession slot for something that's not very useful. There are a few things which you can sell. I believe there's a Shadowlands companion. I haven't really looked into it much though, so I'm not exactly sure what the profit margins are there. And I do believe there's a few, I think there's bombs, which are sometimes used in Mythic Plus, but generally engineering is just not very useful for the gold making factors. But of course, it's really up to you. Some servers are going to do way better than others, but in just the overall profession, there's not many of good items that are actually going to be useful for just a standard gold maker or crafter. The next question that we have is, which route is the best for lithium ore farming apart from Google ones? So I incorporated this question into this Q&A because I thought it was actually pretty good question to ask. The reason for that is, whether it's a lithium ore or not, I get a lot of questions about the best farming spots or the best routes and just how to find them, how are they considered good, etc., etc. But I will say, if you're trying to find routes that are not on Google, you're going to have a very hard time basically finding that, unless a very new expansion comes out or something changes within the game. At this point, everything, if it's known to be good, it is now on the internet, whether it's on a website, just you can Google it right into Google Images and stuff will pop up, or it's inside of a farming YouTube video. Definitely the best routes right now are already figured out, so there's not going to be any potential secret routes. Of course, There's always that slim chance that a like secret golden route has not been discovered yet, but generally to find your best outcomes, Google is going to be the place that you want to go. But I will say for any type of farm needs, whether it's leather or herbs from any expansion, if it's volatiles, primals, the non-profession stuff, definitely look at the website wow-professions.com. There'll be a picture on screen, and I can also leave the URL in the description down below, but that is by far my favorite place to look for routes. The reason for that is, let's say you click on a video or you just type it into Google Images, you're going to have a lot of different options from, like 8 months ago, 2 years ago, 1 month ago. Like they're all different time frames, and it's very, very hard to compare and find different results by either just looking at an image or, watching like 10-minute videos. That takes up a lot of time to find exactly what you want to do. So what that website does is if you go onto the farming guides, then let's say, you select on a lithium ore, let's say, or for this example, I'm actually going to use like arcane crystals and thorium ore. If you click on the website, I believe the first route that's going to show up is Winter Spring, and it gives you like a little blurb about what it is. So it says like the reason why Winter Spring is the best because the route is very consistent, it's very easy to navigate, and also the nodes are very, very close together to get you the most, items per hour. And it gives you that top recommendation. But let's say you go to Winter Spring and you realize there's 4 other druids flying around and you're not getting a lot of good ore, then on the website right below, it will literally say like if there's competition or you do not like Winter Spring, this is like the second best option. That yet again, it will give you like why it's the second best, and then it will give you a route picture as well. And depending on the ore, I believe thorium, there's like 4 or 5 suggestions. Of course, you're not always going to get that for, let's say, a lithium because you're very limited on where you can get it. But I do believe it's the best and fastest way you can get that information using that website. The next question we have is bookkeeping outside of World of Warcraft helpful and or necessary for the goal making long game or long term? Now, I will say this is more of like a personalized question. I will say I'm going to talk about my experience, and then also I'm going to talk about in terms of like maybe if you kind of want to do this, then you should think about it in kind of like a, third person type of sense. But personally, I do not think it's necessary, at least for myself. Generally, TSM will hold onto all of that long-term data that I might want to look at. For example, if I completed, let's say, a transmog flip sale or a pet flip sale, generally I can look back to see, okay, I bought this 130 days ago and I purchased it for 5K. Sweet, I just sold it for 50K. So, it took me about 130 days to sell, but I made 45K profit. TSM will kind of handle that for you. So in terms of that, like personally for myself, I'm just going to use TSM. But I will say, I know this is like for long-term questions, but I do like to bookkeep for short term. An example of that is simply using my own spreadsheets. I can type in the prices of my materials, what exactly I'm trying to craft, and on short term, it will show me exactly how much profit I'm supposed to make, how many items I can make, and all of that. And I do believe that's very, very useful because sometimes TSM can be clunky or just a little bit hard to kind of visualize that. So I do use like spreadsheets or even as simple as having a piece of paper next to you. And if you sold something, writing down, okay, I sold a panther, I need to go restock that. Or, okay, I sold my sky golem, gotta make sure I do that daily cooldown. Stuff like that, I do believe it's very, very useful, especially if you're somebody who has a lot of alts. You have to log out, relog a ton of times. Or, you just have a habit like me, forgetting stuff. I definitely think having like a simple pen and paper or even a sticky note, something like that to kind of write down what you're trying to remember. But in terms of long-term data, I really don't think it's necessary. I will say if you're somebody who's trying to calculate profit and sales across multi-realms, this might actually be good for you if you are somebody like that. A great example of this is the Lazy Goldmaker. If you guys have not heard of him, I definitely suggest you checking out his YouTube channel. He has a great series about him trying, I believe it's 0 to 100 million. And he's on like, I think it's about 6 servers. I might be wrong on that. My numbers might be a little bit off, but he uses a spreadsheet that he calculates and like it shows you exactly like the percent change from the previous week, how much gold he's made from each exact server, percentages change in sales data, all of that. And that is something that you can look at the long-term game. You know, it's there every single week. So if he ever's like, okay, what did I do 2 months ago? He has that spreadsheet to look at. So I highly recommend if you're somebody who's kind of doing multi-realm stuff, or you want to look back on the past in kind of a more detailed way, maybe bookkeeping can definitely be something for you. The next question we have is, what are my thoughts on bots? And do you think it would make a big difference in the realm's economy if Blizzard would ban 30 bots or so from that realm? So just, you know, the obvious answer, bots are not good. Bots are against TOS, and of course, you should not be doing that. You definitely are going to get permabanned, and you deserve to be permabanned if you are either attempting to bot, you're botting, or, you know, anything of those sorts. So bots, you know, for the game is not good at all, and it is strictly against TOS. But I will say, in terms of gold making, you can think of bots in 2 different ways. So this is not like talking about TOS, this is not talking about botting itself, but I'm talking about using bots to your advantage. We're going to talk about 2 different gold making factors, the farmer and the crafter. So if you are a farmer, bots are very, very bad for you because they are your direct competition. So, you know, you're going to go farm Serenite, and all of a sudden 8 druids who are following each other goes down to the same node, you know, scoops it up right before you, flies away before you even comprehend what just happened. And then you realize, okay, we got some bots on our hands. And then, you know, it's 1 against 8, and those 8 people are computers, and at the end of the day, like, you probably are going to lose that farm spot. So in terms of farming, bots can definitely be bad because they're just artificial competition, and of course, you know, that's 8 more players who are harvesting that ore. They're gonna throw it onto the auction house, and then, you know, that price is probably going to crash down, causing you, the farmer, to also sell your mats cheaper. So definitely bots in a farming aspect can be very bad. But I will say, as a crafter, you can definitely utilize bots to your advantage. Just a very well-known example of this is Spirits of Harmony. In early BFA, there were a lot of bots using a Spirit of Harmony farm to just gather, you know, all the resources they can to sell on the auction house. And because that was the trend that time, spirits, the quantity of them skyrocketed and the price of them plummeted. Normally on the very high pop servers, you could easily buy thousands of Spirits of Harmony for 50 gold and sometimes even cheaper a piece, which was absolutely insane. I know a ton of people who scooped them up, and some still have like a stockpile to this day, depending on how much they use them. But that was definitely a scene of the bots and what the bots can do to an economy. Then, you know, pre-patch hit, Shadowlands hit, the bots either went over to Classic, they either went over to the brand new Shadowlands farms, and there's new materials, and, you know, they faded away from Spirits of Harmony, and if you look at region charts, the quantity has dropped, and right now, like, the NA average price is anywhere between 200 gold, and I think somewhere they're like 300 gold as well. So going from, you know, like an average of 50 gold, now it's in like the 250s. There's definitely been a huge change, and that's just because the quantity has gone down and the bots are not botting that farm anymore. So in terms of crafting, if you were somebody who was, you know, needing Spirits of Harmony, those bots were definitely a very nice thing for you to have because there was a lot more stock on the auction house and that price dropped lower. So Even though bots are not good, and I do believe they can ruin the economy, you can also, since they are there and Blizzard's the only people that can deal with it, you know, utilizing them to your advantage can definitely be a great way. Definitely if you're a crafter. Now, in terms of a big difference with the economy, I believe, you know, banning 30 bots is really not going to do much, especially on a full pop server. The reason for that is, you know, once they are banned, they just come back most of the time, sadly. You know, people like botters are expected to be banned. And once that happens, generally they just make more tunes, make more characters, and go right back at it. So I will say like a small term ban wave, let's say 30 people, especially on a full pop server who has, you know, thousands of players, you're not going to see a huge difference with 30. But on your lower populations, there's potentially going to be a market change. I mean, of course, if it's a massive ban wave and for some reason all of the bots completely got eradicated, then of course we might see a lot of markets kind of occur like we had the Spirits of Harmony. But in terms of like just 20 or 30 bots, generally that's not going to make a huge difference. The next question we have is, what do you feel about WoW losing so many subscribers, and do you feel it on your sales? So I'm not going to get into the whole like why WoW is losing subscribers. I mean, by the data we have, it's facts. People are leaving the game for their own reasons, so I'm not really going to talk about that. In general, I do believe that it's sad that WoW is losing subscribers, but hopefully Blizzard can make some turnarounds and, you know, get their player base back. But I'm going to focus on the gold making side of this, and I will say personally, I have not felt my sales differ a ton. Keep in mind, I am on a US medium pop server, so in general, I'm not getting a lot of sales compared to a full pop or other people playing on like the higher populations, but on my medium pop server, I have not seen much of a difference. But I will say, not talking from my experience, but from people in my Discord, I have seen a lot of people talk about how normally reset days or other days are a lot slower than they used to be. They're not getting as many average sales per day, etc. So, I mean, as people leave, because it's a fact people are, definitely the amount of potential buyers are going to lessen as time goes on. So I wouldn't be surprised, I wouldn't be shocked if you are going to start feeling it, but technically I haven't personally had any experience with that yet. But please let me know if you guys have, and of course, kind of what server you're on and how that's kind of affecting you, if you're somebody who has kind of felt that, you know, buyer average drop. The next two questions that we have work really well together, so I'm going to talk about the first one, and it's going to lead strictly right into that second one. But the first one we have is, what are my thoughts on the legendary market after the Korthite crystal crash, and do I think it's still viable? So I will say, I think the Korthite crystal crash was actually a very good thing, which I'm not exactly sure if that's a popular opinion or not, but I do believe it's very good because it helps the beginner gold makers, and it also helps the average player. What I mean by this is, you know, it used to be that you would be spending 80,000 gold on Korthite crystals just to make one rank 5 or rank 6 legendary, which means you have to have at least 80k to start crafting, you know, these rank 5s or rank 6s per piece as a gold maker. And then also you had to have, you know, like 100k plus to buy the legendary if you're just a generalized player. So like both sides definitely had a very hard time. Talking about the beginner gold makers who might only have, you know, like 200 to 300k or even, you know, 1,000,000 gold, definitely spending 80k as a practical down payment on every single new ranked legendary can definitely, you know, definitely did not feel very good. Now, of course, if you are just a standardized player, spending 100k plus on an item which you might have to replace once again, or anything like that, definitely is not much of a, you know, good thing either. So the fact that the Korthite crystal has crashed, that means cheaper materials for the crafter, and also that means cheaper prices for the buyer. So everybody kind of has like a win-win. Now, Of course, during the initial crash, a lot of the legendaries kind of turned to zero profit because a lot of people panicked and stuff, but I do believe if it hasn't settled already, I do believe that profit is going to go back up under normal circumstances. Of course, if there's something going on your server, of course, we always have those, crazy happenings that's not going to be like the average or the most happenings, so some servers might not recover, but I have seen personally on my server that the Korthite crystals have, stabilized, which means my profits have actually increased quite a bit. But to put it into perspective of the buyer's sake, I think this is super good because let's say you were planning on buying a rank 6 ring or something and you were planning to buy it for 200k. You go onto the auction house and you realize you only have to buy it for, let's say, 80k. So right then and there, you are saving about 120k, which you already were okay with spending, like you already were going to plan to spend it, but you can just save that gold. So now you have your rank 6 ring, and let's say, you had this 120k left. You can either buy yourself a second legendary, so let's say like a PvP legendary, mythic legendary, raiding legendary, something, else specific, or you can send that gold over and buy yourself a legendary for one of your alts, etc. Or, you can just put that money back into potions, food, maybe buy yourself a mount, etc., etc. So the buyer who was, going to spend 200k, they might actually buy 2 legendaries now. Or all of that gold that they saved, they're going to put it into a different market. So I do think the Korthite crystal crash was a good thing, and I do believe that the legendary market is still very viable. Now, this kind of goes into the second question, which is my thoughts on gold making with 9.1.5. And if you guys aren't familiar with the new patch that will be releasing, there is something that has only been teased so far, and it is called legendary recrafting. So this was teased in like a Wowhead article, and I believe it might have been originally from a Twitter post. I'm not exactly sure, but from today's date, it is the 30th of August. So far, I have no other information besides the fact that it's been posted as a tease. So we don't exactly know what legendary recrafting means. I do believe there might be 2 possibilities, and the first one does not really affect the market, and what it is let's say you have a legendary that you either want to change the power or you don't want to use anymore, then you can scrap it, let's per se, and you're going to get either soul ash or soul cinders back depending on the rank. So basically, you don't have to run Torghast a ton of times. You're going to kind of get refunded for that soul ash or soul cinders. I've seen that kind of theory go along, and if that's the case, that means that person will still have to buy a legendary if they, want to craft another one. So in that case, that does not really affect, and that can actually improve the legendary market. But if it is kind of a recrafting way, which means that they can, change the power or something like that, if there's ever buffs or nerfs or they want to change the power of that item and that they do not have to buy a whole nother base, they can just switch it out. That definitely can prevent a few sales from happening, but you still have to realize that if they're trying to change a slot, let's say one power is on a cape and the other one is on wrist, then, I'm pretty sure you're not going to be able to get away with doing that. Maybe they can sell their cape on the auction house, but that cape's probably soulbound at that point. So, they're still going to have to end up buying that wrist piece. But this is something that is just teased. I will say, we don't exactly know what that's going to be looking like, but that's just something to look out for. And of course, I'll give you as much information as I know whenever I hear it. In other things about 9.1.5, I think they are all super positive. The alt friendliness changes, so no more mall intro. If you've done it, you can skip it. And also the fact that you're going to be able to get renown easier, and just the ability to level up alts, and there's just quicker changes and abilities for your alts. I definitely think that makes it so alts are definitely going to be a lot easier to achieve. So what this means is, let's say you're sitting on a high-level alt that you haven't brought into Shadowlands yet because you don't want to do that mall intro. You'll be able to skip it, go right into Oribos, and then you can pick up some professions if you haven't already, or you can pick up some double professions for, crafting reasons, or whatever you want. You're definitely going to be able to get a lot more alts into Shadowlands. Also, with the more alts, that means a lot more raw gold tactics. So the more alts, the more mission tables you have if you do mission tables for gold, and also the more access to callings that you have. And each calling gives you about 2k raw gold. So, if you can double the amount of alts and it takes a lot less time, you can start getting double the raw gold by using the table or the callings or just any of the weekly items, stuff like that. So I do think the gold making effect of 9.1.5 is going to be very beneficial overall. But of course, I plan to make a more detailed video about this soon. The next question we have, which I believe is question number 8, we have, how do I deal with burnout from gold making or WoW in general? So, firstly, I believe burnout is very, very real. Everybody will probably experience this at some point, and if you already have, you will probably experience it again. And I believe, depending on if it's just from gold making or if it's from WoW in general, there's different ways that you can combat this. So the first thing I suggest, if you ever are feeling burnt out, you should stop playing. So if you are getting burnt out from gold making, but you still are okay with playing WoW, go do some raids, go do Mythic Plus, go do PvP, level up your characters, basically do anything in the game that doesn't involve gold making, and that will help you, kind of get that urge to go back to the gold once, it might be a few days, a few hours, a few weeks, a month, whatever it is. Definitely just leave gold making, don't come back to it, don't force yourself to post your auctions until you feel that urge to start doing it again. Now, if it's WoW in general, stop playing the game. Do not push yourself to play WoW if you do not want to, because that's going to cause you a burnout that might have been only 3 days. It turns out to be 3 weeks or 3 months. I've personally done this. I mean, at my early stages of gold making, I just was like, okay, I'm just going to log in 10 minutes a day, post my auctions, log out, and I'll be fine. But I dreaded logging in every single day, and it made it worse because I pushed myself to do it, and eventually I didn't play the game for about 3 months straight in late BFA. So I highly recommend, if you are feeling burnt out, either just stop playing video games in general, go work on something that you do, another hobby of yours, or if you have, a Switch, PS4 or 5, Xbox, go pick up a game that you've been meaning to play or finish, go watch a TV show, spend your time doing something else, and eventually that urge to come back to WoW will come back. But do not push yourself to play through the game or do anything. You're definitely going to cause yourself even more burnout and even more breaks than you should have had. And we have our final 2 questions, which once again kind of relate to each other. And so the first one we have is, what is the best way to make gold at the moment? So this is a very tricky question because I firmly believe that there is no quote-unquote best way to make gold, because it's all, server dependent. It's also personal dependent. You definitely want to enjoy the farm that you are doing. But since you said at the moment, I can give you a little bit of ideas, but it's up to you to do the research on those farms. So at the moment, Shadowlands is still in its prime. So, any Shadowlands farm, a lithium, any of that type of stuff, definitely taking a look at it. The prices might be a little cheaper compared to Old World, but you're definitely going to get those faster sales. Then, of course, any type of Old World Wrath ore, so Wrath of the Lich King ore, or Cataclysm herbs are my go-tos. Volatiles, primals, these are all super good to look at. But it, of course, just depends on how much gold per hour you're looking for and also what type of sell rate. The best thing you can do is just look onto your server. There's an add-on called Worth It. You can also use the wow-professions.com that I suggested previously, and just look on that for guides, estimated gold per hour, and figure out exactly what you want to do. Which then, this leads into the next question, which is, how can I play WoW for free? So I will say playing WoW for free can actually be a lot simpler than one might seem. I mean, just from the looks of it, like if we just want to, look at the big picture, let's say if you're EU, let's say you have to make 300k for a WoW token. So big picture, you have to make 300k per month to play the game for free. So, 300k seems like a huge number, especially if you're starting from scratch, and that can be very overwhelming. But if you break it down, let's say, there's about 30 days in each month, 300k, divide that by that 30 days, then there you go. You're instantly there with 10k a day. 10k a day actually seems pretty doable. I mean, if a calling gives 2k each, if you have 5 characters, do each one calling every single day, there you go. You have your 10k strictly from just doing your callings. You can go do an old world farm that I would say averages anywhere between 20 to 40k an hour, and there you go. You have your potential 10k right there. If you're looking for a more detailed guide, which I kind of based my little quick explanation on, I do have a YouTube video. It's literally called like playing WoW for free. I will link it down below. I highly suggest that video. I show my real world example on EU, exactly how I was playing for free on EU. I gave you the breakdowns, the percentages, the calculations. So if you're somebody who actually wants to get serious with it, I highly recommend checking out that video. But in terms of everything, just break it out day by day. 10k a day seems a lot less scary than 300k a month, at least in my personal opinion. But I hope that makes a little bit of sense, and that finally brings us to the end of this video. So I know that was a ton of knowledge. That was probably 30 minutes of me just talking straight about gold making, about WoW, all of that, all of my opinions. So don't be afraid to ask questions if I said something that did not make sense. I've been talking for a while, so who knows what I've said. And of course, if you just have any questions or you disagree with something, feel free to let me know and we can have a conversation about it. Also, I love to hear you guys' opinions, so if you think something I said is either something really good or something really bad, feel free to let me know. I like to see everybody's different sides of the story. And of course, if you have any type of gold making story for yourself, you can encourage others. You can also warn others, depending on what the story is. But thank you guys so much for watching. Like I always say, be sure to join the Discord to have notified about videos when I'm going live, and also that's the best way to contact me. But thank you guys so much for watching, and of course, have a good day.